What's up, people? Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am E-Money You Heard, your host. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. If you're seeing this, welcome. If this is going to be your first time, welcome. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe as well. Okay, we're almost at 570. Let's keep that number going. Also, subscribe to my Twitch channel. That's not growing quite as quickly, but you know, it is what it is. It's a grind, no matter how you look at it. So, yeah, we have 30 followers on Twitch. We're almost at 570 on YouTube. 500,000 channel views total, more than 500,000, about 520,000 to be specific. So we're making progress. Given some more time, things will really take off, I feel. I just have to stay consistent. So, again, if this is your first time in here, look, we're just chatting, okay? There is no agenda. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about, okay? Do not come in here with drama, all right? And as long as you keep the drama, save the drama for your mama, leave that shit at the door, things will be all right. Again, if this is your first time here, okay, this is a nice little community we've built up. Consider subscribing, consider hitting the like button, and yeah, I got a few things I'm gonna cover. All right, we got some Dr. Phil stories and some other stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and see what Dr. Phil has to say. We're just gonna jump right into this.
Could the United States be on the precipice of collapse, or even worse, a second civil war?
Right out the gate, I think we're closer to just complete fallout than we've ever been.
If Texans or people in New Hampshire or any other state vote wrong, then the 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats and President Peepaw are going to get on the red phone and they're going to come carpet bomb Walmart in Houston, Texas. That kind of argument is reckless.
The United States of America is headed.
I like Dr. Phil. He's straight to the point, man. He's no bars hold.
Towards a civil war. I believe the civil war can happen within the next 5 years, so 2029. I think to say it can't happen now is very naive. Of course it can happen. We're on shaky ground right now. There's several indicators why I think a civil war will happen. The first thing, our government is ruling as if it's a dictatorship. And no one is talking about this, but this is really important. Our government has collapsed our nation on top of itself through the economy. That's right out of Marxism. They're just throwing money away. And what's happening is they're giving mass entitlements. The second is called ethnic entrepreneurship. Politicians have weaponized our differences.
I feel like
That's a great way of putting it. I don't think I've ever heard it worded better. They are weaponizing our differences. That's
getting stuff forced on us
insane,
that
man.
we really don't have too much to do with, and they're trying to divide us and trying to cause a civil war, which is total BS.
The border's a big one. You see illegal immigration coming in. Who's getting all that money? It happened in Germany with the Muslims. The Germans are up in arms because all of the Social Security that they're supposed to get and they work for are being given to the Muslims because there's so many Muslims came into their country. Right now, the debt we have in this country, it takes more of our money than any other part of our budget. The debt The amount of pressure that that's putting on the United States as a whole it can create the tipping point. I think that
I've said it before, man. I worry about the future. I'm very, very, very worried about the future. It looks very, very dark for us. I'm really worried about what's gonna happen.
if we don't right this ship right now, then we will certainly no longer have a country.
You wrote that a civil war is coming before 2030. Why?
Because all the markers that are out there that are dictating where we are, and where we're heading, is showing that that's what's going to happen. These are the markers that the CIA uses to determine whether or not civil wars will break out in other countries. And given application to our own country, we're highly likely to have a civil war by 2029.
That's crazy. Did you hear that? She said we are very likely to have a civil war by the year 2030. That's fucking scary.
What are the biggest markers?
The biggest markers are, one, the overall collapse of the country in on itself economically. Two, the fact that we are no longer a constitutional republic, that we are half democracy, half dictatorship. And three, that our political leaders have weaponized our differences for their own political gain. And when you factor all those in, that spells civil war for us.
What part is dictatorship?
Look at the country, how it's being run. I mean, all you have to do is watch how much money has been given to Ukraine when people are starving and having a hard time. And then you have our politicians sending millions, trillions of dollars off to Ukraine and then waving from Ukrainian flags in our house. If that doesn't spell dictatorship. We have no control over our government anymore. 68% of the country believes that the government is operating without their consent. It's not just a Republican, Democrat,
Everyone
situation.
should be worried.
Very few actually say that this
Should be
country
very, very
is
concerned.
working for them.
This next election is
going
going to change
Who is it
things.
working for today?
For the swamp.
For the
For the
swamp. Which, for me, it doesn't mean that I think civil war is a solution, because I think that evil just follows you. We've had many countries break away. We broke away from England ourselves, and yet here we're sitting with a corrupt government. So is it going to be the solution? Maybe a temporary fix, but that's not the solution, in my opinion.
Would you feel differently about this if the border was under control?
I don't think you have a country if you don't have a border. And what we really have, in my mind, all practical purposes, is just an economic zone that really just exists to serve the interest of the elite that run things. And we can call it the United States, but I mean, we've got government, federal government minions and NGOs down there offering people money and giving them a pile of money, putting them on a plane, sending them to 4-star hotels. This isn't incompetence that the federal government's doing. This is an overt, brazen aiding and abetting of a very destructive, deadly invasion that took my son and took many other Texans and Americans.
Well, in California, they're giving them cash benefits and letting them vote.
This is fucking insane.
I don't want to be subjugated to a government like that.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I'm disagreeing with what is the quickest route from A to B in getting that changed. But absolutely, I mean, I'm a big proponent of immigration and a big proponent of closing the border, except through ports of entry, and fixing some of the problems that are creating this. We've got to change this trajectory, but I don't think necessarily the way to change it is to bust it up.
Secession is clearly becoming a more prominent part of our politics. I think it is likely that a state could move in the next several decades to hold a vote on whether its citizens want to leave the Union. However, there are so many hurdles in the path of a successful secession movement. First of all, there is a very powerful national mythology of American unity. We are the United States of America. I think a lot of people would have a hard time getting behind such a movement. There's a huge question about whether secession is even legal or constitutional in the United States. This is what the first Civil War was fought over, and it's unlikely that the federal government would simply let a state go. There are all kinds of practical questions that would have to be worked out related to currency, land, federal property, the federal debt, military installations, any number of practical obstacles in the way of the state leaving. There's no point in pretending we're
This
not
shit
as
goes
divided as we
deep,
are.
man.
I think what all the talk of secession and civil war really means is that we're truly fundamentally divided, and that is what we should be paying attention to.
Things
There's
are,
nothing more powerful.
things are not going to get better. It's just not possible. I hate to say that. I hate to be that guy. But you know what? I'm a realist. And I call it like I see it. And I see things getting very, very bad. Much worse than they are now.
Well, Richard Kreitner joins us now, and he is the author of Break It Up, Secession, Division, and the Secret History of America's Imperfect Union. What are your thoughts on what you've heard so far?
I think I disagree with quite a lot. To say that we're in a dictatorship and to cite as evidence for that people are waving Ukrainian flags, or just a disagreement about what we do with our tax dollars,
I don't like the fact that we're just giving away money to fund a war across the ocean when the most basic of things is not being addressed. I mean, we have starving people on our own streets. We have children starving in what is supposed to be the greatest country in the world. How is that possible? How do you have children homeless and starving on our own streets, but we have enough money to fund a war overseas?
Military spending or foreign aid or something versus stuff at home, that's a normal, everyday political dispute. I think there's also a serious kind of underestimation of...
I mean, don't get me wrong. I feel like there's just too much money to be made and too much expansion that's possible, and I don't think the corruption will ever let us go. If that makes sense.
Obstacles to secession. Texas does have the 8th largest economy. Would it have the 8th largest economy the day after leaving the United States? I really don't think so. I also think there's an element that we should talk about, which is that this is what Russia wants. Russia is a master of disinformation, and over the last 8 years has seized on every little blip of secession talk. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about secession. I wrote an entire book about it. I think we should. But we can't talk about this outside the context of how foreign powers, foreign adversaries have looked at this idea of disunion throughout the centuries and look at it now.
Well, I think there's no question what you're saying is right. This kind of thing is certainly pushed by foreign governments. They love to hear us talk about this. They love dissension. I can tell you that I interviewed Donald Trump, and as soon as I interviewed Trump, tens of thousands of bots swarmed the internet, criticizing every word of this or word that, criticizing even doing the interview. And we identify them, and several of them were deployed out of Russia.
Right.
And we're talking tens of thousands. I don't think we're nearly as divided as people think. I think a lot of this division is within, not between states.
I think a lot of the stuff that we see is just on the internet. It's a lot of internet talk. I don't think it in a grand scale covers the whole look of the way life is here. I don't think it's an accurate representation of how it actually is.
Those fires are getting fanned by foreign interests.
That's absolutely right. Russian bot farms played a major role in making Calexit trend after the 2016 election and in making Texit trend after the 2020 election. And they keep trying to do this and sow division in the United States.
So what's your cautionary tale about this?
I think the biggest one is this claim that happened peacefully. The same claim was made by Southerners, by Confederates in the 1850s, 1860, 1861. There was one Southern politician who even said that he would personally drink up every drop of blood that was shed in a conflict with the federal government. He didn't do that because 700,000 people died.
Yeah, 700,000 military died, plus civilians.
I think we have a duty as humans who are looking at this issue and grappling with these questions to not come to the table with the notion of civil war. But if we actually go in with the lens of this isn't working, how can we peacefully get out of this relationship?
I feel that's very idealistic.
Sure.
Well,
Well, we don't live in an idealistic society.
Because people don't behave properly.
Right. You just made my point.
No,
That's why it's not
but
gonna
that's
work.
why it behooves us to do something better. I mean, if you're going to come to the table and be like, yo, I'm going to kill you if you don't do what I say, that doesn't seem like a great way to come to a better solution.
And I mean, I want you to think about this, right? So the big advocacy here is for Texans to have a referendum on this issue. What we want is a fair, open discussion that culminates in a vote where people actually go and get to vote. And what the contention is that if Texans or people in New Hampshire or any other state vote wrong, then the 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats and President Peepaw are going to get on the red phone and they're going to come carpet bomb Walmart in Houston, Texas. And it's like, wait a minute. If we're ascribing that sort of behavior, if we're failing to act on our right of self-government because that's the fear, then what does that tell us about Washington, D.C.? That they're going to behave like North Korea or Syria or any of these other dictatorships? I mean, what does that
Yeah, but
say
let me
about
point
them?
something out. That kind of argument is reckless.
Ooh. That's why I fuck with Dr. Phil. All right. Dr. Phil keeps it real. He's a smart dude and demands respect. He gets it. He's got my respect. You feel me? When you're wrong, you're wrong. Dr. Phil's like, your turn.
To use that
The
term.
old boy's like,
The case that they make.
That's not what I mean by violence. I'm not saying that the federal government would or should. I would certainly be against. I'm not going to war to keep you in the union. No way. You know,
Can I get that in writing?
absolutely. I mean, I'm nobody, but yes. What I'm saying is the North, the Union, Abraham Lincoln did not fire the first shot in the Civil War.
Understand.
It happened over federal property that there was a serious disagreement about whose it was going to be. I can see something like that happening again. It's spiraling out of your control and everybody else's.
That's
It could be
why I say
extremely bloody
this.
and
That's why I say this is reckless and premature conversation.
But Dr. Phil, let me ask you, 3 years ago, we introduced a constitutional amendment which would allow Granite Staters, New Hampshiremen, to vote on whether they want to stay in the Union. It was 2 sentences. Now, I'm not going to lie, it got shot down. We had 13 legislators voted for it. 13 out of 400, that wasn't great. But then we brought it back based on what people told us they wanted to hear. So the second time we introduced it with a $40 trillion cap. So we said there's a triggering event. If the federal government's debt reaches $40 trillion, then we will take this vote to the citizens of the state, right? And we'll let the people decide. We, the people, get to decide. And that seems eminently reasonable to me. We also, based on the feedback we heard from people, tried to introduce a study committee so that when we start to grapple with these difficult questions, how would it work? You know, where would I get my Social Security? Well, people in Mexico still receive their Social Security. So if there's an appetite, again...
People that secede in Texas are not getting Social Security.
Well, you know what? I've got news for you. No one's going to get their Social Security at the rate we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Now, make no mistake about it, they will continue to collect that money, promising the payment to those generations to come. But the economic system is unsustainable on the federal level. So, we have to begin to have conversations about whether or not Texas should reassert its right of self-government.
But I think
Because if we leave it up to the federal government, they're going to drive this car off the cliff and we'll be sitting in the passenger seat.
I kind of agree with him.
Between an idea and action.
No, if you're expecting the government to just hand it to you, you better reassess that. Ain't nothing in this life free.
The chances of seceding successfully with a functional government, infrastructure, medical and educational facilities, etc., to me is just beyond belief. Does anyone believe the new country will not be plagued by the same selfish, whiny, complaining career victims that will squawk even louder for any reason or no reason at all? Squawking has replaced baseball and NASCAR as the national pastime. It is another curse of social media, and
Yo, Dr. Phil be he be spitting some wild shit sometimes. He called him squawking.
unless the new country bans social media, internet, cable TV, the squawking will continue. A new smaller country that breaks off from the mothership will just have fewer resources with which to try and deal with the
Yo, Phil can't keep a straight face, man.
entitled demands.
Oh shit! Hey, look, y'all make sure y'all please hit the like button. Please subscribe. All right. We're growing. Come hang out, man. We'll have a good time, all right?
It won't matter how the new government is designed. The one variable you cannot control is people. Sometimes we can just be the worst. Just as water seeks its own level, so does human nature. If you have a country with only 2 people in it,
so hard to keep a straight face.
They will eventually be at odds. Add one more person to the mix, and you'll end up with a conspiracy.
That's funny.
One of the last things I consider when thinking about what might be best for this country.
Yo, Dr. Phil's doing stand up, bro. Oh shit. Let's hear this one more time. Yo, he legit had some lady in the crowd laughing.
There's a big difference between an idea and action. The chances of seceding successfully with a functional government, infrastructure, medical and educational facilities, etc., to me is just beyond belief. Does anyone believe the new country will not be plagued by the same selfish, whiny, complaining career victims that will squawk even louder for any reason or no reason at all? Squawking has replaced baseball and NASCAR as the national pastime. It is another curse of social media, and unless the new country bans social media, internet, cable TV, the squawking will continue. A new smaller country that breaks off from the mothership will just have fewer resources with which to try and deal with the endless entitled demands. It won't matter how the new government is designed. The one variable you cannot control
I have so much
people.
respect for this guy.
Sometimes we can just be the worst. Just as water seeks its own level, so does human nature. If you have a country with only 2 people in it, they will eventually be at odds. Add one more person to the mix, and you'll end up with a conspiracy.
Oh my God.
One of the last things I consider when thinking about what might be best for this country is what people believe. Cynical? Maybe. But come on. 3 to 6 million Americans still believe the earth is flat. 20 to 30 million believe the moon landings were faked. 50 million believe 9/11 was an inside job orchestrated by the U.S. government. 95 million people believe in astrology. That's almost a third of the country. 148 million people believe in ghosts. That's why I prefer facts over feelings, virtue over vanity, and values over volume. Maybe we will change some geographical and governmental boundaries, or some states may merge. I mean, do we really need North and South Dakota? I mean, I'm just asking. I'm sure they're both great. Whether we will actually experience succession is an empirical question. Only time will tell. But here is my prediction. If we do make a change, it will occur for reasons not even considered in our discussion. The idea of a new state country with its own governance and independence, in my view, is not even a good idea. Here's a better idea, in my humble but perfectly accurate opinion. Why don't we fix the country we have? We only have the best track record in the history of the world. Has anyone noticed that all of this divisiveness we keep talking about is as much within states as between states? So you would be taking your problems with you when you break off. A wise man I know says we have issues. So let's define them and fix them. We're not nearly as different and divided as the echo chambers of the internet, social media, and cable TV news make it sound.
Well, perfectly stated again. It's an inaccurate representation of how things really are between all of us.
Think about this. What if tomorrow morning everybody woke up and made a simple and singular commitment that for the next 30 days, do unto others as you would have them do unto you? How might things look different? I love this country. I stand up when the flag goes by. I put my hand over my heart when they play the national anthem. And if you're part of that 70% of the mainstream majority in America, and you too love this country, it's time for you also to say, I've decided to stand strong for America's soul and sanity. I've decided to be who I am on purpose and live with intention. You need to say, I've decided to stop trying to win arguments and started trying to solve problems. I've decided to say, hey, we hear you, Dr. Phil. We know the truth when we hear it, and you are speaking the truth. We are with you when it comes to focusing on family, faith, and freedom, and taking back America and all it stands for, and we will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced.
Woo! Shit. That's crazy. This is all shorts. Hey, babe. Damn, there's gotta be something on.
With multi-view on NFL Sunday Ticket,
This video is sponsored by Z-Biotics. In the WWE and wrestling more broadly, there are a myriad of traditions and unwritten rules most fans just don't know about. And I know about them firsthand from my time as a WWE wrestler. Now, I would share this
This
with
is
you,
Maven
but
Huffman.
the YouTube channel Tap Out Corner already made a video about this. So we're
He
going
was
to
a
watch it
WWE
together, and I'm
superstar
gonna
from
tell
like
you
2001
where I
to
agree
2005.
and maybe where I could add some
Now he's
additional
like,
context.
he has a dedicated like
let's
YouTube
watch.
channel, like,
Wrestling is so much more than just a
which
job.
is like all
Wrestlers more
insider
than
stuff.
WWE, it's a lifestyle.
It is a lifestyle. That's 100% accurate. Wrestling was my identity. It was who I was. I was no longer.
He lucked
Mayor
out and like
Hoffman,
basically
former
won like a
teacher,
lottery.
former baseball player.
Well, I wouldn't say, yeah, he lucked out and won a lot. It was like a lottery type
24 years of my
type of
life,
situation.
at that moment,
That's how he got
was
in.
almost null and void. Had no consequence. From that moment moving forward, I became Maven the Wrestler.
One tradition you may notice when watching WWE is wrestlers wiping their feet on the edge of the ring. There are a few reasons why they do this. One is simply to help keep the ring clean. Garbage and other waste can attach themselves to a wrestler's boots, so to prevent it from being brought into the ring, wrestlers wipe off.
For most wrestling promotions, and the WWE not as much, but for most wrestling promotions, most indie promotions, they don't have a bunch of extra canvases just lying around that they can use. Most of them have the one canvas that they're using, and they're putting up and they're tearing down at the end of every show, and then it's going to be used at the next show, and it's going to go to the next town. And that same canvas over time, it gets filthy, it gets nasty, it gets so much bacteria in it. I remember during my training at HWA, the developmental center in Cincinnati where I trained Heartland Wrestling, we had a guy who actually got a face infection from having his face down on the mat. And man, there's nothing you want less on this earth than having your face infected, from a wrestling mat.
Additionally, it's a sign of respect. Respect for the ring, where many wrestlers have given their blood, sweat, tears, and lives, and where many more will in the future.
A lot of people are trained by old school guys who just talk, man. That's what you do. Respect for your opponent, respect for your craft, respect for your ring that you're about to get in. Wipe your feet off. That's why in the clip you saw William Regal and Mark Henry do it. They were trained by someone who taught them the importance of that. At Tough Enough, we had Al teach us, we had Taz tell us about wiping our boots off, and if we didn't do it, they would yell at us. They would tell us and make sure we did. It wasn't something that transferred to me once I got out and started wrestling. And that was probably because, man, I had enough to worry about. I had the match to worry about. One less thing to just check off my bucket list of things to not think about before I went out there. But when I watch guys do it, I definitely take note. So, Mr. Corner.
I wonder what that mat feels like.
It's funny how the word lifestyle is still ringing in my head.
I wonder if it's like a yoga mat, like it's like soft like that.
One thing that all wrestlers did the moment a show was over was look for something to eat. Once you leave an arena, you're hungry. Sometimes a bite to...
I think I've seen this already. just want to find something to watch. That's right, man. I haven't had a Taste Buds or a Hey Babe episode recently. It's been 2 months, man. What the hell? Onic. What's up, Onic? Onyx gaming tonight. Delta Force is too much fun. We may check that out in the future. We'll see. Ooh, we got another Patrick Bet David podcast coming on tonight. Ooh, wait, is it tonight? Oh no, it's coming on tomorrow. Oh, that's whack. Feel me? It was whack. You feel me? Hold up. Do not disturb. Put that. Don't disturb me, man. Sean Ryan, steak and eggs. Maybe Tectone. You know what? I'm not up to date on like none of the shit he be talking about. I just like hearing him rant, to be honest. He has lost a lot of weight, though. I'll give him that.
Morning. Anything that you do, don't give a fuck about you or anything.
This is where I want to get eventually. I mean, this dude's got thousands of people. That's all I want. I don't need millions, you know, just a few thousand, you know, so I can monetize everything and.
Wake up! Yeah, good morning, guys. 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 Good morning, 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 good morning. Good morning, 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 good morning. At Tectone. Yep, here we go. Forcefully dating Tectone gone wrong. What is this clip's title? What? First of all, modded. I think Kate is the only VTuber in history where their boobs are their
That's crazy.
actually smaller than their boobs in real life.
This dude's obsessed with like anime women and like their curves and, which I mean, you know, to each his own.
It's actually fucking insane. Also, dude, my chest mod is actually so shit, it's unbelievable. I can't tell you, almost every single one of my relatives has gone to that website and completely shit on me. Even like 8-year-old kids have gone to that website and modded me. And they said, oh, look, Uncle Techie, I beat you in chess. I'm like, bitch, no, you didn't, you dumb fuck. And then I make sure their parents beat them twice that day instead of usual once. Yo, dude, chat, we got a lot of shit to do today. We got a lot of shit to do today. Have you do solo environment? No, I haven't. But I'm going to be running a Julio to get doxxed by HSR players. Okay. Alright. For who don't know, Intel found out a fake Hoya Works employee's Twitter account claims that Topaz is based on her, she's a trans, and they start to emotionally break down. They then try to dox all employees and find out more proofs. Proof? Proof? Where is it at? Proof? Random Twitter post with no credentials whatsoever. Proof? Yeah. Are you gonna do the new HSR story today? I will be real. I have no interest in doing the new HSR story.
This shit is so fucking stupid.
I know chat's gonna lie to me and say that it's good. But I know it's gonna be fucking trash. I know it's probably about Yun Li and Yang Jing. And I know people are just gonna straight up cap. I bet you it's boring as shit. You know, there's only so much Yun Li feet I want to see in my video games. I think I'm good. Ken got a video that I'm sure would do well if you react.
Hey guys, it's me, Diddy P, and it's about time to have another.
Yeah, man, Diamond Dallas Page looks good, man. Even all these years later. I mean, age has obviously caught up with him, but damn.
Universal champion, the one and only American Nightmare, Dusty.
Like my mom. My mom does that.
No, the one and only God, I fucked myself twice.
Nope, I love it. I'll be Dusty.
The one and only American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, and dude, what a crazy ride it's been.
Bret Hart blasts Hulk Hogan over WWF title loss.
The first WrestleMania with your champion is WrestleMania 9 in Caesar's Palace. They've got the Vestal Virgins, they've got Macho Man getting fed grapes by women in robes. Lucky him. And they have you and Yokozuna. Yokozuna's won the Royal Rumble. It was the first year where the Rumble winner would get the shot at WrestleMania. And then...
Today's episode of the Y-Files is brought to you by the Heckelfish for President campaign. Today...
You can find me in the club, a bottle full of bug. I'm into having sex, I ain't into making love. So come give me a hug, if you're into getting rubbed. Go shawty, it's your birthday, we're gonna party like it's your birthday. When I pull out up front, you see the Benz on the nose. When I roll 180.
That's crazy. Shit. They turned 50's fucking in the club into a country track. John Cena versus the Bloodline rival history. Well, you know Cena was all juiced up back then.
Cena with a classic vintage.
I ain't gonna lie, Black Myth Wukong looks really good. The gameplay looks really badass. I mean, I don't know all the drama and shit behind it, you know, but the game itself looks really cool. Oh, can you really, like, fly on a cloud like Goku? That was cool. Oh, the Giants of Afghanistan.
Of all the nations known throughout recorded history, there aren't many that hold the proud distinction of having never been conquered or colonized by invading forces. Afghanistan is one of these select few countries. Alexander the Great, the Persians, the Mongols, the British Empire, and the recent hegemon of the Soviet
Yeah, it seems like Afghanistan's always at war. It's weird.
Union have all attempted to subdue this Middle Eastern nation. All have failed, thus cementing Afghanistan's place in history as the graveyard of empires. But what is the secret behind the country's enduring resistance against the invading forces of foreign, often more powerful armies? Many strategists will cite the Afghan terrain as being the key to its success, namely its vast mountain ranges. Their vast network of uncharted footpaths, valleys, overlooks, and cave systems have proven effective in concealing even entire armies from the eyes of their enemies. In more recent years, the British, Australian, Canadian, and American troops tasked with rooting out insurgents from within this imposing landscape have no less faced an overwhelming task. There are some among these men, however, who found the task
No, the next
all
one.
the more unnerving. While exploring these mountains on foot, flying unmanned aerial vehicles overhead, and interviewing local villagers, these men realized that the mountains of Afghanistan harbor far more than rebel insurgents. They describe witnessing creatures that have long been believed to be extinct, if not complete myths. This is the Smoke Pit, and these are true stories from military servicemen of giants in Afghanistan.
That's wild. I've heard several stories like this.
You want to know what my theory? Sorry. Of today's video, even though my data in description, we 2001.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing. Just keep your eyes peeled.
In the aftermath of the September 11th terrorist attack.
Chat, don't forget, you can support the channel on Cash App as well. Okay, check my bio. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Yeah. Come chat with your boy. Yeah. I do believe my wife is giving me some Oreo cheesecake. Ooh. Sounds really good. I don't know what's taking her so long though. I bet she didn't. I'll be right back. Ooh, chat. This is really good. I mean, really good.
The United States military launched Operation Enduring Freedom, which began in October of 2001. Their goal was the dismantling of the Taliban regime that was harboring al-Qaeda terrorists, believed to be responsible for the attacks. This military action involved a large-scale deployment of U.S. forces into Afghanistan, leading to significant combat operations and the toppling of the Taliban government. Squaring off against
20 years and we just yanked everybody out, left people behind, got people killed. That's crazy.
Overwhelming American air superiority, the Taliban forces soon fled the cities, finding refuge in the nation's many vast, rugged mountain ranges.
Left like $86 billion worth of fucking military equipment behind.
The insurgents then launched a fierce resistance against both the American troops and their Western allies. With the Kandahar region being identified as a key stronghold for the Taliban, securing the mountains was essential in disrupting their supply lines, their operations, and control. To accomplish this monumental task, the Americans would employ a search and destroy strategy. These missions involved ground troops, often special operations forces, such as the U.S. Army Rangers and Navy SEALs, conducting thorough searches of areas known or suspected to be occupied by the enemy. The operations often required clearing and securing large areas of terrain, sometimes involving house-to-house searches, or patrolling through remote regions looking for caves. Search and destroy missions were usually coordinated with intelligence gathered from various sources, including reconnaissance flights, surveillance drones, and local informants. This intelligence helped identify likely enemy locations and optimize mission effectiveness. The mountainous terrain otherwise required adapting their tactics to deal with the high altitude conditions and the challenging geography.
It's also not the first time I've heard like the terrain like really working against like foreigners.
Uniquely dangerous as these missions were, whether from the enemy's improvised explosive devices, IEDs, accidents and injuries, or direct engagements, it was no surprise that patrols often suffered casualties. However, sometime in early 2002,
No wonder some of these guys came back so messed up.
Disappeared entirely. Alarmed at the prolonged period of radio silence, another Special Forces team was quickly
sit there and
inserted
see one of
into
your
the
buddies
Kandahar
get blown up
Mountains
in front of
to
you.
find the missing men and return with either their
couldn't
bodies
imagine that.
or any remaining survivors. Far from what they might have expected, however, the true fate of the missing patrol would take them beyond anything they had been trained for.
Hold up. It looks like we got something here.
Oh, man.
This is
messed
up.
Sarge.
I think I've heard.
Definitely are.
I think I've heard Mr. Ballin tell this story. It's weird to see it with actual like illustrations, though.
Guys, look at this gear. It's like he got ripped right off him.
Should we set up a sit rep now?
No, stay sharp. Whatever happened here, we might still be in the middle of it. Rifles up. Patrolling
God, that
along
was
some
so
area
good.
where the previous team had been inserted, this second team soon stumbled across pieces of scattered military gear and shredded uniforms.
Shit.
Which,
so the squadron they done found all kinds of like helmets and pieces of like military like clothing and gear and stuff.
clearly belonged to the missing men. Puzzled by what appeared to be a macabre trail of breadcrumbs, they began following it, keeping their rifles at the ready, increasingly unsure of what to expect. Having worked their way up a steep mountain footpath, the men eventually found themselves standing in front of a series
I haven't
of
seen this,
large
but I've heard the
caves.
story told.
But the caves were not what first caught their attention.
Bones scattered
Literally
everywhere.
The ground in front of the cave entrances was what appeared to be piles of bones. Despite this unusually gruesome feature, their first thought was that this must be a part of a vast Taliban cave network. But before they had time to formulate their next plan of action, the Special Forces team was suddenly confronted with a far more terrifying reality. Emerging from one of the caves, its primal war cry echoing off the surrounding mountains, a giant man appeared, wielding a long wooden spear. Its head crowned with thick, untamed red hair, its body wrapped in animal skins, its teeth bared in a primitive challenge, it charged directly at the now stunned Americans. Before the
This supposedly actually happened, allegedly.
men could even raise their rifles, the giant, massive spear in hand, had thrust the weapon through the torso of the nearest man, simultaneously lifting him off the ground, prompting the other men to let loose with a torrent of gunfire. After 30 seconds of sustained firing, the giant finally collapsed, bringing the harrowing ordeal to an abrupt end.
Okay, so where's the body? This thing is huge.
Skinwalker 2, say again, line 5, over.
I say again, line 5, one letter, Alpha. Break. Sierra 1 is down. We need immediate medevac. Over.
Roger, line 1 through line 5 is received. Lima Charlie, break.
Not gonna believe this shit.
For line 6, interrogative.
Here comes.
You said Tango was a what? Over.
Ah, damn it. Golf India Alpha November Tango. A very large man with a wooden spear. Over.
Told you.
Roger that. Wait 1, over.
Baffled and horrified by their encounter, the operators immediately radioed back to their command, a transmission that arguably must have been the most insane situation report ever heard by the man sitting radio watch on the other end. Undoubtedly, it took time to clarify what they were trying to report, that one of their team members was now dead, and that they had just killed his attacker, a literal giant. Once the report had been submitted, they remained on site, waiting for the arrival of the extraction team and marveling at the size of this creature. Taking measurements of the massive, foul-smelling corpse, the giant was described as being at least 13 feet tall, and notably having 6 fingers on each hand, its gaping mouth showing 2 rows of teeth. The men also came to another horrifying realization about the piles of bones and military gear they had seen scattered around the area. It appeared they wouldn't be returning with any of the missing team's bodies. The giant had clearly eaten them. But they would soon find out that the giant's corpse was evidently of great interest to someone up the chain of command. After some time, a Chinook transport helicopter arrived, bringing with it loading pallets and harnessing gear. They were going to take the giant back.
I'm telling you, I just know that there are things out there that they actually exist, and all this time they just wanted to keep
After
it
each
all
man shared his
secret.
account of the mission, namely the details of the climactic battle with
Some
a
for
literal
some
giant,
obvious reasons
they were
and
made to
some not
sign
so obvious
non-disclosure
reasons.
agreements, forever swearing to secrecy regarding the encounter. This came as no surprise to the operators. They never saw the thing's body after departing the helicopter. They had no proof. Even if they wanted to tell someone about their incredible encounter, who on earth would believe them?
That's what makes it so sinister, is that no one would believe you. That's wild. That was the giant of Kandahar.
Since the story began making headlines in various military papers and other news sites in 2022, the Giant of Kandahar has since become a staple in the vast realm of cryptid lore.
You know, it's crazy. What if that was like the last of its kind? And because y'all happened upon his home and startled him, he engaged you and y'all killed him. And he was the last of his kind. How fucked up would that be, huh?
But how did this incredible story first come to light? The earliest known record of the account surfaced in 2008, only about 6 years after the incident was said to have taken place. So much for keeping it a secret. However, the original testimony came not from any of the soldiers who reportedly killed the giant, but from the pilot of the CH-47 Chinook helicopter that transported its corpse out of the mountains.
That's what I'm saying. Somebody other than those soldiers saw that
by
thing.
George Norrie on the Coast to Coast AM program.
They've got a
during
drawing
the
of like a big
episode titled
like cargo
Flashpoints
type
and
helicopter
Giants.
with the back
Considering that he only
bay
witnessed
door
the loading
open
and
and this thing
transport
like
of the giant's
on
body,
a set
his
of
own
pallets or
testimony
something.
includes
It's
very
covered by
little
this
about
net,
what had happened
and one
before
like
the
6-fingered
helicopter
hand
arrived
is hanging
to
out
pick it up.
while soldiers
His
are like
testimony was compelling in that he never sought to
help,
embellish
like
the story
standing
by
around
recounting a
and
harrowing
one guy's
tale
like
of
guiding it
a man
in or
being
something.
speared by
I
the
don't know.
giant,
It's weird.
followed by a dramatic firefight. The pilot simply explained only what he had personally witnessed.
This thing
and was forthcoming in
impaled.
stating that he heard most of what had happened secondhand
Let's say
from
this
the
thing was
soldiers
10
who had
feet
killed the
tall.
creature.
Imagine the size of the spear that it had, if it was in proportion to him.
It had actually taken out the first crew that had found him, and they went in afterwards, and when they came up on this thing, supposedly...
You hear that? This thing had taken out the first squadron that had gone through and found him.
Of course, secondhand. But the way they painted it out, yes, this guy was eating probably more than our guys with the killing fields that they more or less described. But they basically said that thing ran like the wind, threw stones at the guys at a pretty good distance, so they said. And of course, our weapons did take it out because I was looking at this dead thing. So most of
That's insane, man. Can you imagine some 10-foot tall fucking thing like 200 yards away, like hurling like rocks the size of small boulders at you from a distance, and moving like super fast? Oh my god.
covered up with the tarps and the rigging and stuff like that. And most of what we had to see, we were just goofing around with and seeing what we could see on this thing because it was a pretty large dude. Could not, poke it, measure it, or anything like that. I can tell you that its hands more or less look kind of human, very dirty, except for the 6 fingers.
Having already been
This
covered
thing
by
had
a large
6
tarp and
fingers.
strapped
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Holy shit, man.
to a 463L pallet, a standard aircraft loading pallet measuring 9 by 7 feet, the pilot
I
otherwise
find it
had a
hard to
clear
believe
view
that they just
of the
allowed
creature's
this one
hands
hand to
and
just
feet.
hang out.
Though he wasn't allowed to get close enough to get exact measurements, the pilot estimated that the feet, which were covered in some kind of canvas material, like rudimentary shoes, were at least 28 to 30 inches in length. Having been curled into a fetal position to fit onto the loading pallet, if it had been laid out, he remarked that the giant would have easily measured a staggering 12 feet in height, if not more.
Holy shit,
Charged
dude.
with airlifting the thing out of the mountains, the
I'm sitting here talking like 10 feet. This thing was 12 feet tall, man. A whole nother 2 feet on top of that.
pilot could at least accurately attest to how much it weighed.
What I can tell you is the weight of the thing, basically, it was approximately 1,500 pounds what was getting on the aircraft. Now, if you take away the pallet weight and all the rigging that we had to hold this thing down, we figured it was around 1,100 pounds.
When asked about what else he saw that was noteworthy, he said the fingers were pasty white in color, appearing Caucasian, which was surprising considering the dark complexion of the local people. But, he reasoned, this could have been attributed to the creature now being dead. He also
That's true,
described
too.
the awful, musky, skunk-like odor coming from the thing, which he offhandedly said must have been intolerable for his loadmaster, who was riding with the body in the back of the Chinook as they returned to base. In closing, when asked about...
Can you imagine if that thing wasn't dead? And you flying this thing back to your military base and all of a sudden it wakes up.
where the giant ended up, he said he wasn't sure, but got the impression it had been transloaded back to an Air
1,
Force
2,
base
3,
in
4,
Ohio.
5. Yeah, damn, 6
Mention was
fingers.
then made in the interview of the fact that there is only one Air Force base in Ohio, referring to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And if that is the case, it only adds to the intrigue of the story and the likeliness for it to be buried by the U.S. government, because that base is notably involved with all manner of things strange and unexplained, such as the Air Force well-documented research into UFO sightings, which began in the 1950s.
There was a nice path, goat path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There was a cave as we're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity. And then bone matter. Well, I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communications equipment.
This is like actual like recording of like one of the soldiers' voices.
So instantly we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it was sheer drop off, but there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of an ambush. And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet in height. This is a monster, red beard. His hair was long, past the shoulder, scarlet red, and he runs at us, woke all of us into the reality. This is so real. We just went into complete muscle memory at that point.
Considering the widespread account of the soldiers' encounter with the Kandahar giant includes details not provided by the Air Force pilot in his 2008 interview, such as the giant's red hair color, its double row of teeth, and the brutal killing of one of the soldiers with a spear, it begs the question, who provided this additional information on the story? In reading through various articles which have covered it, it was stated that in some circles, the truth of this giant story is widely considered to be an open secret among soldiers who served in Kandahar in 2002. But more precisely, in 2016, a video was uploaded to the internet that featured an interview with a man going by the name Mr. K, who claimed to be one of the operators on the search team who encountered the giant. The video has since been pulled down for
Imagine
unknown
how
reasons.
frightening that would be.
Perhaps because his testimony provided more details on the soldier's
12 to
actual
15,
violent encounter. His
most
testimony has
likely
come to
barbaric.
defy the giant of Kandahar story.
Just a wild
introducing
animal.
The concept of a spear
No
wielding beast
sense
with
of
red
like
hair
understanding
and two
or
rows of
reason.
teeth that took the internet by storm. Of course, with such a shocking story making the rounds in recent years, and even being picked up by the Military Times and reputable news sources, everybody wanted to know, is this story true? When confronted about the alleged incident, the U.S. Department of Defense, to nobody's great surprise, stated that they had no record or information about a Special Forces member being killed by a giant in Kandahar. This official denial, of course, didn't quell anyone's interest in the story. Quite the opposite. Now that the story has been brought to light and is being widely considered credible, even more service members across different nationalities have finally come forward to share their own testimonies about...
Yep, now it's a domino effect. Now everybody's gonna start speaking up. Uh-huh. We've experienced a movement, man. A whistleblower movement.
Similar things they saw during their combat deployments. Fascinating as they are to read, the following accounts, several of which were submitted to the Tales from the Grid Square Project, appear to indicate that the Kandahar giant was only one of many of his kind that still exist, hiding in the remote mountains of Afghanistan.
I could see that, yeah. These desolate
This is the Google
places,
Pixel
man.
9, and this is what trash talk used to look like before you could ask Gemini to make an image of wide receiver gloves
It's
made
like
out of
how
butter.
well can you actually hide from the world, you know? The world gets smaller. The world just keeps getting smaller, so I mean eventually there's gonna be nowhere to hide.
I hired old enemies to check me out. It turns out I was misdiagnosed. What?
I'm not gonna lie, there's one video of a guy out in like the woods, and you could tell it's like it snowed recently, and I forget exactly what he's doing. Like he's building something maybe, and all of a sudden he starts hearing like this otherworldly like like holler out in the distance. You can tell it's like probably a couple of 100 yards away. It's close, but not that close. You know what I mean?
The giant.
It's like one of the most
Canar.
unnerving videos I've ever seen.
Hey, is that a new optic?
Yeah. Recon 3 or something. LT wanted me to test it out and then train everybody else.
How's it working?
Well, I'll put it this way. I am just pushing buttons and seeing what happens. Oh. Okay, I do see. Huh. Looks like we got a couple of tally just over there.
How many?
Oh, maybe 2? 3? It's just a big blob. It's hard to tell. It's like they're all huddled around. Oh. Oh.
What?
That can't. Hey, how tall would you say the trees are around here?
Huh?
The trees. How tall on average are the trees?
Oh, I don't know, maybe
I'm trying to
10.
see. I'm trying to see what he's looking at. Like, are they showing anything in the graphic?
15 feet?
That's what I thought.
Well, he wasn't seeing Taliban. He was
This
seeing
story comes from a
giants.
soldier who was serving in northeastern Afghanistan several years after the original Kandahar story is said to have occurred. He was actually in country when the 2008 coast-to-coast interview about the Kandahar giant first aired. He writes, I was deployed as an infantry team leader with the Army in the Kunar province of Afghanistan from 2008 to 2009. One night, we set out on an observation patrol to overlook a village that we suspected IEDs, improvised explosive devices, were coming out of due to a successful IED recovery a few weeks prior. My lieutenant gave me a new thermal imaging system called the Recon 3 that none of us were familiar with, and told me to figure out what I could and pass along that information to the other team leaders. I started to look across the valley to what I could see, and that led me to look along the spur we were set in on, catching on a very large heat signature at the top of one of the false peaks. I did everything I could to get a clear image, suspecting that it was a group of Taliban huddled together around a light, as they tend to do in the mountains. All of a sudden, the heat signature stood up as one being.
Damn.
The trees in that area grew to about 10 to 12 feet tall, and this thing was at least as big, if not taller, than the trees that surrounded it. It started taking steps parallel to my position and was covering ground quickly with ease.
That's huge, man.
Stride was slow and relaxed, and yet it moved with incredible speed. That led me to believe this creature was gigantic. It very quickly traversed the landscape, and I lost sight of it along a neighboring spur. I couldn't believe what I saw initially, assuming I had imagined it. I never had seen anything like that in my life. I didn't tell many people about it, either when I was still in the Army, and even when I got out. I kept it to myself, thinking there was no way I saw what I saw. But then, in 2010, I listened to a story on Coast to Coast, specifically the story about the giant of Kandahar. That made all the memories of my time in service come flooding back and made me consider other things I saw during that deployment. For instance, the Kandahar creature was described as having fire orange red hair, and it reminded me of a tradition that the locals in the area of my sighting would do. The Afghanis would dye their hair a bright orange color, and even dye their goats the same color. They never gave any explanation why. It seemed like it was every once in a while they would do this, and then all of a sudden those orange-dyed goats would be gone. and the locals' hair would also no longer be dyed orange. I assumed maybe it was a cultural thing. I didn't understand, but now it makes me wonder if that was some kind of gesture
to
the creature, or if the goats were being sacrificed to it. I am a Christian, and the Bible briefly discusses beings called the Nephilim. I think that's what I saw. A member of an ancient race of giants. Although he mentions the interview with the Air Force pilot being what reminded him of his own experience, it should be reiterated that the 2008 coast-to-coast broadcast did not provide any details about the giant having red hair. Those came about in 2016. It's possible that almost a decade on, considering Mr. K's interview and everything else that's been said about the Kandahar giant story since it first aired, the detail about the red hair got mixed up in the overall narrative, hence why this soldier thought he heard about it from the Chinook pilot. But it's no less interesting that he did find a correlation with the hair dyeing practice of the Afghani people in the region that seemingly validated the idea that the giant's hair could have been red, as Mr. K had indicated. If the giants are out there, even today, preying on humans, as the Kandahar story ominously indicates, he otherwise may not have been at all wrong to reason that the villagers would make efforts to appease the giants by dyeing their hair and making sacrificial offerings of red-haired goats. But far from all of them being cave-dwelling monsters, this next account depicts the giants as being much more human in their way of life.
Now we're gonna switch it up.
Giants on the Reaper feed.
Reaper actual, this is Raptor 1 Tag 1. We've reached grid 267 and E34, observing multiple individuals around a campfire requesting ISR sweep. Over. Copy Raptor 1 Tag 1, maintain current position. Confirm visual.
Holy shit, look at the size difference to him and the goat.
Reaper actual, Raptor 1 Tag 2, visual confirmed. 8 individuals on the way Afghani civilians.
This next story was shared by an Air Force veteran who served in Afghanistan as a UAV, or unmanned aerial vehicle, operator. He is absolutely certain of the existence of these beings, because what he saw was unmistakable. He writes, I was a senior operator on the Reaper, heading up to work, a tasking in the northern parts of the country. I was scanning around, doing my thing, and looking at stuff. There are small villages up high in the central mountains that I've scanned probably a dozen times. I found a super small mud hut, which is where I saw the giants. They were 3-ish, maybe even 4 meters tall. There's a ruler tool on the screen that tells you how wide your crosshair is, and these people were as tall as the crosshair was wide. They didn't do anything crazy, just normal people things, tending fires and other chores. I wish I could say they did something exciting, but really they just moped around their small clearing. There were a few goats tied up, and a fire that one of them was tending. Hard to tell details, but they seemed to wear rugged clothing. I would guess similar to Afghan traditional garb from how they move, but they seemed heavily cloaked. The only interesting thing was their size. The goats looked like cats next to them. This was all in midwave IR, infrared at night, so they showed up as black humanoid heat signatures. I wish I could have used our daytime camera. I always wondered if they had red hair. I was only able to monitor them for like 10 minutes before we were too far away to see.
Be nice to see that actual
The
footage,
giant
huh?
of Korengal. Being a drone operator with eyes high above the terrain would of course be an ideal way to see a lot more than the average soldier on the ground possibly could. That applies to spotting both enemy soldiers and whatever else is out there. But when it comes to gathering intel using drones, a lot of what is observed is recorded and then sent for more careful analysis. Full motion video, or FMV, analysts in Afghanistan played a crucial role in military operations, intelligence gathering, and surveillance. Their primary responsibility was to analyze live and recorded video feeds from various aerial surveillance platforms, such as drones and manned aircraft. This next account was shared by another Air Force veteran who was working as an intel analyst in Afghanistan sometime between 2012 and 2018. The video footage he was tasked with reviewing was recorded near the Korangal Valley in the Kunar province, which often served as a covert route for Taliban insurgents to funnel men and supplies over the border with Pakistan. It sounds like his primary goal in reviewing the footage was to determine
Right, it's on the table. Switch it out. $2, buddy. You can.
I heard what she said. Oh, chat. Chat. Let us continue.
Patterns of life, basically getting an idea of what people living in the area, possibly enemy insurgents, were doing on a day-to-day basis. When they wake up, where they go, when they come back, if they carry weapons, what kind of weapons, etc. And this is typically done prior to committing any other operations in the area, like sending foot patrols to the villages and so on. However, this airman describes witnessing a far more unnerving sight. He writes, I was an FMV analyst from 2012 to 2018. We were doing a pre-op soak northeast of Korangal, getting patterns of life on damn near every warm body. We saw some dudes around a fire, which is completely normal, but watched to see if we could ID any weapons. After about 20 minutes, what we thought were two dudes huddled together under a blanket.
Nope, that doesn't
stood
work.
up. I mean, this guy made the rest of the dudes look like children in terms of height. He stood up and walked over to a mud hut that he had to bend way over to get inside. We were using infrared, IR, so I couldn't say if he was red-haired or not, but I just know
I was
that
trying
he
to do
was a
something a
big
little
mother
fancier,
effer,
but it didn't work.
at least 8 or 9
Sorry.
feet tall.
Well,
it's worth noting from his observations, he indicated this particular giant was intermingling with
I'm thinking
local
I'm gonna end the
villagers.
stream.
The people in Afghanistan and the surrounding regions have long been very tribal, adhering to their cultural
Hour and a
differences.
half, huh?
Perhaps the giants, not far from being human themselves,
Just chilling,
are
you know?
similarly diverse, including
Ain't
their
nothing
diets.
much going on, just hanging
Maybe not
out.
all of them are man-eaters. Of course, nothing is really known about these giants
I mean,
other than what has been
a few people
scantily
come
observed.
in, you know, but
as
hey,
far as
what
their
can you do?
coexistence with humans is concerned, and as one of these men indicated in his testimony, giants have been documented as far back as at least 5,000 or 6,000 years.
Damn.
A giant named Goliath fought with the
Right.
Philistine army, and he was their most fearsome soldier, standing nearly 10 feet tall and carrying a bronze spear with a tip that weighed nearly 15 pounds by itself. Just the tip of the spear. By comparison, your standard fully loaded military rifle weighs half of that. Far from Goliath being the only giant, the annals of King David from 3,000 years ago would indicate there were other remnants of an ancient giant race that he and his men fought and killed in later battles, along with those accounted for much earlier by Moses and Joshua. They are often called the Rephaites, or...
That's crazy, man. They were fighting these things like thousands of years ago.
Rephaim. being descendants of a giant
Raphaim.
named Rapha. Another of them was killed by King David's brother, Jonathan, in a battle in Gath, Goliath's homeland. Like the giant of Kandahar, he was recorded in the second book of Samuel as being a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on
Oh, remember that? The first guy had 6 fingers.
each foot, 24 in all. Like
24
Goliath at the head
digits.
of an army, one would expect that in any tribe, the leader would often be the biggest, meanest, and strongest one in the group. That might explain why a giant named Og was made king over the region of Bashan, northwest of the Sea of Galilee in modern-day Syria. How do we know
Modern-day
he was
Syria,
a giant?
Bashan.
He was cited by Joshua as being one of the last of the Rephaites. The third book of Deuteronomy records him having an iron bedstead, presumably because he needed something stronger than wood. A bed which measured 13 feet in length by 6 feet in width. It doesn't sound like he would have slept comfortably on a small army cot. Giants ruling over humans, fighting alongside them millennia ago. And now, in even the last 2 decades, we hear tell of giants warming themselves by the fire with Afghani locals. This next account would likewise indicate that giants are still out there in remote areas, intermingling with humans to this day.
Got Domino's or
I would shit a brick, man, if I saw a giant. Psych got rainbow that shit.
The giant of Uruzgan.
Uruzgan. I was gonna say the giant of Uruk.
Hi, Dave.
Uruk.
Got anything with caffeine in it? I think I'm losing my marbles heavy. I'm seeing things.
What's that, Lieutenant? You saying intelligence?
No, it's never mind. Just I must be knackered.
All right, mate. Hang tight.
His next account was shared by an Australian officer serving in the central region of Afghanistan, possibly with either the Mentoring Task Force or the Special Operations Task Force, based on the context he provides. In his story, we find him sitting up on his LAV, light armored vehicle, late at night, keeping an eye out for enemy insurgents. Like the previous soldier's observations through night optics, as with most of the other testimonies, I am no less struck by the general matter-of-fact tone this man takes when sharing his incredible story. Something the Air Force pilot who was interviewed on the Coast to Coast AM program more or less stated: even if you have never believed in something like giants, when you suddenly find yourself looking at one, you can't really do much else but just accept the facts. The Australian officer writes, I was an LT in the Australian Army at the time, and
LT
deployed
is
to the
lieutenant,
Uruzgan
in case you
province.
didn't know.
I was on picket, what you Yanks would call security or sentry, in my LAV in the early hours one morning.
Yanks.
And was scanning across the valley with the thermal imager. That was when I saw a large, human-like figure that looked different from normal because it didn't have the usual clothes the Afghans would wear. It looked like a person, but lankier. Not much detail through the thermal imager and due to distance. It walked behind a few compounds, and I could see it from the chest/armpits up. I lazed the compound walls to confirm the distance a few times because I knew I had a good return off the walls. I thought it was around 500 to 600 meters out, but when I did a more detailed scan, I realized it was further away. Using the LRF, the laser rangefinder, I was shocked to see it was actually at a distance of 1,800 meters. It wasn't in any hurry, and I followed it for about 5 minutes before it went out of my field of view. No idea what it was, but it would have been at least 12 feet tall.
Damn.
I don't know of anyone else who saw anything like it. Never told anyone about it before, but it has stayed with me over all these years. Of course, by now, we realize that he is not alone in seeing something like that. I get the feeling that these few accounts are not the only ones either. But of course, as each of these men has indicated, nobody wants to go around telling people that they saw what most would consider a fairy tale monster.
For real.
So, like so many others, they keep it to
You know,
themselves.
when I see
until someone
when I hear
takes a
stuff like
sincere
this, man,
interest in hearing their story.
you know, I think of like werewolves and dogmen and stuff like that, man. Like, is there something out there? You know, something like that, similar to that, very very similar to something like that. I mean, who the fuck really knows, man?
As if all these stories were not enough, just recently in late 2023, a journalist named Mike from Atlas News reached out to me to do an interview. When we finally spoke, I realized that he is also an Army combat veteran who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. We had a long talk about all manner of the strange and unexplained with regard.
You know, I tried to join the military once. It didn't work out, man. It wasn't the right time and the right circumstances. I kind of wish I'd have been able to do it, you know. I think it was something that I needed. Like I needed to just make a big decision to just get my life going in the right direction, and I didn't get that opportunity. I don't want to delve into why, but I just wasn't able to. But I did try the Navy.
Or to military operations, bases, training grounds, religious texts, and so on. And about halfway through the conversation, we landed on the subject of cryptids, and Mike was quick to express his disbelief in many of these entities.
Man.
But then he offhandedly told me
Look, I think a lot of them are a little off, you know, quite a bit off, just way out there. But
in summary,
some of the stuff, man,
near the eastern Afghan border with Pakistan, a region not far from where many of these aforementioned giants
there's like
were
maybe
seen.
a handful of like
His unit's mission was what he directly referred to as humans, or human
cryptids that
intelligence
I
gathering,
think
interviewing the local village
potentially
leaders and trying
exist.
to glean any intel they could give him about Taliban insurgents moving through the area. But during a conversation with one man, his interpreter explained that the man was trying to tell them to avoid going into the nearby mountains because there was a group of individuals living there that most of the villagers tried to avoid. Individuals, he said, that had pale skin, a habit of harassing the locals while they were feeding their goats in the highlands, and even throwing large rocks at them. Through his interpreter, and then showing his own rifle and the rifles of the men around him, Mike then asked if these pale-skinned individuals carried any kind of rifles or other weapons, and whether they were Taliban.
He was like, no, they're like you guys, like white, but they wear like clothes like us. In fact, they don't have like plate carriers. But I just remember the dude was like, yeah, they have like beards and they're like heavy set, and they're super tall like you guys. And so I didn't really put it down until later, and I asked them, I was like, hey, did we get that base figured out? And they're like, yeah, it's nothing, don't worry about it. But it was like, this dude literally just told us the story of his life. I don't know, maybe it's a nomadic tally base, but it was just one of those weird things where it was like, why don't you tell us where these people live? And then years later, somebody talked about Afghan giants, and I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I thought about it, and I was like, well, the description matches up, and the kind of remote location matches up. And so after I discovered all this stuff, I'm looking back, I'm like, I don't know. I chalk it up to it being just foreign fighters, Syrians, Chechens or something, but that is sort of weird.
With the Kandahar giant being possibly the only direct confrontation between soldiers and a remnant species of giant men, at least in Afghanistan, it's understandable why this would appear nothing more than a modern-day spin on the David and Goliath story. But the fact there are other witnesses, all of whom relay grounded testimony, devoid
Right,
of
military people too. That's the thing.
When I enlisted in the Marine Corps, it took me a while to get used to being in the military, because some of the most mundane things that we did as part of the job, well, initially they seemed very strange to me. One of those things was the idea of going to the field. My first thought was that we were literally going to an actual field, just setting up tents in an open grassy area and living outside for a few days. But since there would be work involved, it would be like camping with extra steps. I guess that's not exactly wrong, but we never had tents. Being recon, we spent the entire time doing patrols and just roughing it out in the jungle, like Mowgli. And even if we did sleep in tents at times, most people would pick nice, safe, dry spots to set up their tents when they go camping, right? The military doesn't do that. Well, maybe the Air Force does because, well, they go camping at the Hilton. But when I reached my first duty station in Hawaii, going to the field meant packing up a week's worth of food, water, fuel, batteries, our rifles, all of our personal gear, radios, and so on. And then we would drive in military vehicles in convoy fashion on the highway, or hop on a helicopter and go from our base to one of several military training installations on the island, most of which were covered in thick jungle. Going to the field therefore means something different depending on where any given unit is located in the world. For instance, Hawaii was often windy, rainy, and miserable at night, but besides the centipedes, there wasn't much animal life out there in the jungle that would bother you. And they do bite, and they're very painful. But other than that, there wasn't really much out there. Going to the field on Camp Pendleton in California meant you might run into a rattlesnake or two, and probably stick yourself with a few cacti when you're walking around out in the desert at night. But the following two stories, one from a Marine conducting training in the mountains of Northern California, and the other from a National Guardsman training in the Wisconsin mountains east of the Mississippi River, well, I'm not sure I have any idea what they encountered.
Neither do I.
Especially as they indicate, if it wasn't human. This is the Smoke Pit. And these are true stories submitted by fellow service members. Stories about encounters that they had with something that is collectively known as a pale crawler, a rake.
A rake? What? The
Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center, Bridgeport, California.
Hold on, let's check this out. This is wartime stories. It's good stuff.
With its picturesque, gently rolling hills, dark forests,
it's a lot of animated stories
and gothic castles.
I'll definitely give it a Google, give it a YouTube.
It's no surprise that Germany has served as the backdrop for some of literature's most iconic fairy tales. Drawing on the incredibly rich folklore of their native land, authors like Jacob and Grimm brought to life timeless stories of evil witches, noble heroes, beautiful princesses, and terrible monsters.
Thank you, wartime stories.
Such stories were born out of a time when man-eating wolves took on public personas as being the reincarnation of evil men, such as the wolf who terrified the people of Ansbach in 1865.
The people of
Ansbach captured him, dressed him in a man's clothes, and then hung him like a criminal. It's no surprise then that in many children's tales, the malevolent force often comes in the form of a devious wolf. To better aid in its deceptive ways, the wolf will often mask its evil intentions by adopting a physical disguise, or most interestingly, shape-shifting, to assume the form of a normal man. We see this in many German folk tales, like the werewolf of Andernach, the werewolf of Ponket, and the white wolf
I think I'm
of
gonna call it,
the
folks.
Mountains.
Alright, if you guys don't mind, go in the comment section and let me know what's your favorite like horror type villain or monster or creature? Just something scary. Just let me know. Also, subscribe to the channel. Like some of the videos. Follow me on Twitch. Add me on Facebook. I got Instagram. I got Twitter. Add me all of that. Don't add me on TikTok though. I don't mess with TikTok, alright? But yeah, do all of that and have a great day. Peace out.